Like, no joke, if you've ever seen that kick done anywhere else before, you have this movie to thank for it. When it comes to classic 80s cinema, you can take your pick of iconic movies that came out that decade. You know, you got your Ghostbusters, you got your RoboCop, Temple of Doom. I mean, the 80s was a breeding ground for huge Hollywood franchises that are still going today. But of course, you can't mention the 80s or the pop culture to come from that era without mentioning the iconic Karate Kid. This is the movie that really started it all for many of us, am I right? The classic fish out of water underdog who has to learn a skill to beat his bullies and get the girl. I mean, come on, this stuff is classic. But you guys know us at JoBlo, and I want to rewind it all the way back to the beginning and take a look at the first Karate Kid movie and figure out what makes it so iconic all these years later. Whew, almost ran myself out of breath, but that is how much I love this movie. So let's pass it over to EJ and get into it.
Hey, Karate Kid!
It's crazy how a little movie from 1984 became such a pop culture phenomenon. There are so many iconic phrases that live on with people to this day, and there's a guarantee that everyone's heard at least one of them.
Mr. Miyagi?
Daniel-san. Banzai! Wax on, wax off.
Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir!
Sweep the leg.
And countless others. Not to mention iconic scenes like the catching of the fly with chopsticks, and of course, the crane kick. A move that's been referenced and parodied more times than anyone will know.
Sure, how about some kickboxing?
The hit Netflix show Cobra Kai recently brought the arc between Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence to a close. But Daniel continues to teach Miyagi-Do in this summer's new installment of the franchise, Karate Kid Legends. So let's go back to where it all started. Before the show, before the remake, before the sequels, before the cartoon, before the video games, and before the action figures. Let's take a look at how the Karate Kid became a phenomenon. The Karate Kid is actually inspired by a true story. Producer Jerry Weintraub was a chronic watcher and reader of the news. One fateful day, Weintraub saw a human interest blurb on a kid who was constantly bullied on his block. In order to defend himself, the kid wanted to take karate lessons. Fortunately, he would find a mentor to teach him everything he wanted to know. Weintraub optioned this story about a 9-year-old who had earned a black belt in karate, then reached out to screenwriter Robert Mark Kamen, who was coming off of his recent film, TPS.
What's TPS?
Taps.
Well, why didn't you just say taps?
Taps. Weintraub asked Kamen to write a script based on the news story. It was kismet, because Kamen went through this exact same thing firsthand. The screenwriter became a student of Okinawan Goju Ryu after being bullied himself, and he drew from his own experiences with a teacher that he had, named Fumio Demura. And Demura learned directly from the founder of the style, Sensei Shojin Miyagi. While his script became the classic film that we all know and love, funnily enough, the cast and crew didn't have too high of a regard for it at first. Even star Ralph Macchio thought it was pretty corny early on.
Like, what kind of lame title is that?
Seemingly, it was director John G. Avildsen who was the only one who saw how special the movie was going to be. Everyone would even fight tooth and nail to try to change the title, which they thought sounded a little too much like a children's show. Avildsen had recently given the world one of the greatest underdog movies of all time with the Sylvester Stallone film Rocky. Robert Mark Kamen knew that Avildsen understood the potential of his script. Kamen even says that he and Sylvester Stallone often laugh about some of the similar aspects between their movies. Bill Conti and Survivor even brought their talents to the soundtrack. Obviously, Karate Kid has its own identity, but Avildsen brought a lot of the same heart that shaped Rocky to this movie. One of the things that the movie does brilliantly is teaching the philosophy behind the martial art, in addition to showcasing its physical benefits. It does this by framing the story around one of the most relatable life experiences, navigating high school. The movie approaches the subject by using the backdrop of an age-old fear of young people everywhere, being the new kid at school and getting bullied. Kamen smartly introduces karate in the movie as it's being used aggressively in the wrong hands. And Daniel knows that he should fight fire with fire.
I gotta take karate, that's it.
This sets up the audience for learning how karate is supposed to be used for defense when it's in the right hands. Around this time in the 80s, martial arts were geared more towards a specialty in the action genre in American entertainment. You had Bruce Lee films and Asian cinema showcasing masters of the craft having fantastical battles. TV had the series Kung Fu, as well as special broadcasts like Black Belt Theater and Kung Fu Theater.
I always thought it came from Buddhist temples and stuff like that.
You're too much TV.
However, The Karate Kid was the first true 4-quadrant demographic movie that grounded the concept and expanded it to where most audiences could find themselves realistically learning from this exotic art form. The anchor of it all is experiencing everything through the eyes of Daniel LaRusso. One of the big reasons that Ralph Macchio was cast was not only that he could be likable, but the producers thought he also had the perfect amount of brattiness to him. LaRusso was the vessel for the audience, but he also needed to have a chip on his shoulder, so they could see just how delicate a line someone like him would have to walk while learning karate. You see, Daniel wasn't completely helpless. He had a lot of heart and a plucky attitude. However, he wasn't trained in the ways to truly combat his opposers, which made him a pretty easy target. A pure positive soul like Mr. Miyagi was the perfect force of good that could steer Daniel towards being a better master of himself. This is juxtaposed perfectly by Johnny Lawrence and how John Kreese's influence at Cobra Kai steered him the other way. Johnny Lawrence, although now given a huge bit of development, was the perfect symbol of an equally bratty kid but came from privilege, and was taught karate as an offensive weapon. Johnny seemingly learned to indulge in his worst qualities with this power. He was also surrounded by peers who encouraged him in his behavior. According to William Zabka, he was in competition with names like Crispin Glover and Charlie Sheen for the role of Johnny. As much as those other actors could have brought their own unique spin to the role, Zabka was an inspired choice by Avildsen. As we now have seen, he not only has the look of an intimidating high school bully, but he has the charisma to be a group leader, as well as nailing subtleties in his performance where you can see just how much he relishes in being bad, and equally how much he loathes Daniel's very existence. One of the film's most crucial moments is when Mr. Miyagi and Daniel sit in on a Cobra Kai class. We see how Sensei Kreese runs his ship. He's militaristic, he's not afraid to rough up his own students, and his credo is simply,
no mercy.
Even when he and Miyagi try to talk things out, they don't come to an understanding. Instead, Miyagi challenges his dojo in the All Valley tournament. Martin Kove, who plays John Kreese, said that he and Avildsen aim to make his character an absolute evil, with no redeeming qualities. Even if Kove happened to let a smile slip through, Avildsen would make him do another take.
But I like that. I like that.
The spirit of The Karate Kid no doubt comes from the immaculate performance of Pat Morita, and all the mysticism surrounding his character. According to Robert Mark Kamen, the studio wanted Toshiro Mifune for the role. Mifune had marquee appeal since he was a big name in the martial arts genre with his Kurosawa films. But his Mr. Miyagi was to be more like a traditional elder warrior. His Miyagi would have been stern and scary, with an archetype that more so emphasized honor and dignity. To the credit of Avildsen, Kamen, and the production team, they thought outside the box and went with Morita. Morita was perhaps best known for his role as Mr. Arnold in the sitcom Happy Days. He started his career off as a stand-up comedian, and his look is perhaps the polar opposite of who you may expect to be a karate master. And that's what makes this casting a stroke of genius.
I don't know how, I don't know where it came from. Miyagi voice, Miyagi presence.
Having someone deemed to be too old and unintimidating to be a fighter shows that the power of karate doesn't come from mere brute strength. So when he takes out the Cobra Kai single-handedly, you know it's a force to be reckoned with. It's like how The Empire Strikes Back subverted expectations by revealing Yoda to be a great Jedi warrior. Additionally, Morita was still able to bring gravitas to the role, while also being able to use some of his natural humor. He wasn't afraid to let him get silly every now and then. One of the most brilliant sequences in the film was his method of instilling knowledge of hand techniques into Daniel without him knowing. It was an early example of inception, if you will. In some of the most memorable parts of the film, Miyagi has Daniel do a number of housework until he breaks. When Daniel finally has enough, Miyagi unlocks a series of karate blocking drills within him. Not only was this method humorous for the audience, but it was also a clever way to speed run through lessons in discipline, determination, and patience, while injecting some karate forms into his muscle memory. The filmmakers also teased some Eastern fantastical elements, where Miyagi could conceivably heal certain injuries, using a hand adjustment that starts with him rubbing his palms together. Kamen admitted it was something he just made up, but he wanted an additional dynamic element, so that in the end, when Daniel is nearly eliminated from the tournament and Miyagi slaps his hands together, you know it's about to get real. The movie wins you over with its high school elements early on, which includes Daniel romancing a girl he just met, played here by the equally iconic Elizabeth Shue. Elizabeth Shue. The Karate Kid follows the beats of most high school films that have a love triangle plot, especially how everything culminates with the big showdown between Daniel and Johnny. We can't go through this video without acknowledging the fight choreographer, Pat Johnson. Johnson is a Hollywood vet who can be seen in movies like Enter the Dragon, and has choreographed for films like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies and the first Mortal Kombat. Johnson also has a role as the main referee in this film. Those who may thirst for high-octane martial arts action will have to look other places than this movie, as Johnson keeps things grounded and technical. You can tell he brought things back to a more pure place, as there aren't too many showy moves. However, he does pepper in a few fancy ones to keep things exciting. Avildsen shoots the All-Valley tournament much like the main event in Rocky, where you feel like a spectator of the event. There aren't many dramatic shots or fancy editing, just raw fighting. The first act shows just how much Daniel can't keep up with the Cobra Kais. Now that he's trained by Miyagi, it was immensely gratifying for audiences to see him work his way through them one by one and eventually get to Johnny. Kamen's script is nearly perfect in planting ideas and paying them off in such a crowd-pleasing way. Despite everything that's happened in the franchise since then, the most notable and impactful part of the ending comes at the very end and lasts only a second, but spoke volumes. Johnny takes the trophy, emotionally presents it to Daniel himself, and gives him some due respect. The Karate Kid hit pop culture like a meteor. As stated earlier, the movie spawned a cartoon, toys, video games, 2 sequels, a remake, a spin-off, a sequel series, and now a new legacy sequel. The Karate Kid even became its own subgenre, as lower-budgeted B-movies attempted to rip off its timeless story. It's even been said that enrollment for karate classes spiked up after the popularity of this movie. Obviously, Cobra Kai expanded on the lore, and there's been talk of a Miyagi prequel series over at Netflix. As much as Kamen deserves his credit, John G. Avildsen approached this movie with such care to the story and characters that he used a method that's unheard of, where he recorded an entire feature-length rehearsal of the film on his VHS camcorder. If you'd like to check it out, the full film is on YouTube. With Karate Kid Legends now furthering the adventures of Daniel-san, is there any doubt that Robert Mark Kamen's characters and ideas have stood the test of time? I think Pat Healy from There's Something About Mary said it best.
I guess I just wish they made movies like they used to make. You know, classics like The Karate Kid.
Damn straight.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.